Hey guys, my name is Jerry. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus. I celebrate recovery from drugs, alcohol, and porn, and I struggle with a lot today. What's up? A lot of times, before we give a testimony, someone comes up here and introduces us. Shut your face. And the last time I shared my testimony, the agreement was that Thomas was going to introduce me. The next time I shared, and this is that next time. So my wife was going to introduce me, but I didn't want an introduction. And before I start my testimony, Thomas is a big part of it, and every opportunity I get to make y'all remember him, I'm going to do that. With that being said, I was now 35 years old. I had been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for 4.5 years, and I was living in sin, separated from my wife, having sexual relationships with another female, and my life was yet again completely unmanageable. I suppose in order to understand how I got to this point, I have to start in the beginning. Hello, my name is Jerry. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus who has been set free from drugs, alcohol, porn, and the mindset of ever thinking I would ever be better off without my wife. And today I struggle at times keeping my flesh under submission. I am a born-again, Holy Spirit-filled believer who battled drug and alcohol addiction for 17 years. But as I write this up-to-date testimony, I believe God is directing this to be more about Him and my marriage. But we still cannot get to that point without starting with me being 5 years deep into my meth addiction, when I would meet the woman who today is my wife, my accountability partner, my best friend, and yes, simply my person. I'm very emotional for some reason today. I did not know anything about her other than she was hot as fire, and she didn't know anything about me other than I was a horrible drunk. So we did what all sensible people do, and we got married 2 months after we met. She was already pregnant, and she had a little blue-eyed, curly, blonde-haired girl who became my stepdaughter, and she had no idea she was marrying a meth addict who was also addicted to porn. I was high the day we got married. Looking back with who I am today, it's quite funny to me. The first disagreement we had was over God and if I believed in Him. She stated that she did, and I answered with, our beliefs are about as different as they possibly could be. The entire first year of our marriage was a complete lie. She had no idea I was getting high like I was, and I was lying to myself, saying that when the baby was born, I would stop and get it together. I stayed high as much as possible, and if I wasn't high, I was drunk. When high, I would purposely start fights so I could stay in the living room all night and secretly watch porn. Whatever a good husband and a good man was, it wasn't me. What I was, though, was a liar and a manipulator. I was a drug addict, and I was pretty good at it because it was all I ever knew. On July 27th, which would become a very important day in my life, of 2014, Stephanie would go into labor, and in the early morning of July 28th, we would welcome Malachi into this world. Now, these are supposed to be precious moments in life, but I had been up for 3 days. I had the dope man meet me at the hospital, and again as soon as I got home. So much for quitting when the baby was born. I am now 28 years old, supposed to be a husband to Stephanie and a dad to Peyton, Azaria, and Malachi, but my addiction to meth came before every one of them. In November of 2014, I would get physical with Stephanie for the first time. Coming down and drinking, I would slam her to the concrete ground. She called the cops, and of course I ran to a friend's house. We would separate for the first time after this. During the separation, I would come clean about my addiction to meth, promising if she would take me back, I would quit using. She would take me back, and I would do well for a few weeks until January 1st, 2015, when my mammal passed away. My mammal was the glue that held our family together, and to that point, I had never experienced the hurt and pain like I did when she died. Not knowing how to process the feelings, I did the only thing I knew to do, and that was start getting high again. A month later, I would have Stephanie getting high with me, and for the next 5 months, would be complete insanity. Selling meth in order to constantly use, stay up for a week, get physical and fight, sleep 2 days, wake up, and start the process all over again. We were always pawning our kids off to my mom and my mother-in-law. We would eventually get evicted from our apartment, end up staying with a friend, when one day going to make a deal, the police came where we was with a court order to take our kids from us. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law deemed us unfit parents, which of course we was, and I was so gone, we gave them the kids and I got into the car to go make my deal. I was completely detached from having any feelings at this point. Stephanie, however, wanted to quit using and I did not, which led to an argument one night that ended me choking her. This would be the final straw for her, and she would leave me. I never understood how things got so out of control those 5 months until my dad told me one day, he said, "Son, you dragged her into the pit that you had been digging for 17 years, right to the very depth of it." The hardest step has always been step one for me, realizing I had a problem and my life was unmanageable. I lived under the lie that everyone was out to get me and I was fine. They just needed to leave me alone and let me live my life. I could stop using whenever I wanted to. I just didn't want to quit. I had accepted the lie, and I had accepted the lie that if there was a God, he did not care about me, and I would be a drug addict forever. It was once I came to the realization that I truly had a problem that I was able to begin to think about getting help. I ended up going to detox, and my second night there, which was August 2nd, 2015, I got down on my hands and knees for the very first time in my life and cried out to God. I told him word for word, "I don't know if you're real or not, but if you are, here I am. If you will change me, I will do whatever you want." Psalm 107, 13 and 14 says, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble. He saved them out of their distress. He brought them out of darkness and the shadow of death and broke their chains to pieces." I did not realize in that moment what had happened, but that was me surrendering my God, my will for God's will in my life. My sobriety date is July 27th, 2015, a day before my son would turn 1. I found myself wanting to read the Bible. Nobody had to tell me I should because nobody knew what had happened to me yet, but I had a desire in me that I had never had before. Upon leaving rehab, my wife would come back to me believing and being able to visibly see that there was a change in me. My sister-in-law, who had custody of our son Malachi, would soon take us into her home, disregarding everyone, and I mean everyone, telling her by no means should she let me into her home, and yet she did anyways. She stepped out in blind faith to give me a fair chance, and I will never forget that. I spent the first 5 months of my recovery in what today everyone knows as the Lazarus House. Me and Stephanie would start attending church regularly, and through church we would find people who would become our family and help us along our journey. Stephanie would become pregnant with twins, and we got our own place in December of 2015. On December 1st, we got custody of Malachi back, and in February, we got custody of Azaria back. On May 12, 2016, we welcomed Love and Grace into the world. After a long a long, rough pregnancy, and this was a true precious moment. 3 weeks later, she would leave the hospital. 3 weeks later, we would leave the hospital, go home, and live happily ever after. The end. Well, okay, so that's not really how this story ends. But it will end with Jesus seeing us through every storm we have been through. So here I am now, sober, trying to be a husband and a dad with the mindset of sharing what Jesus had done for me to everyone I knew and help them receive deliverance just like I did. I had a love for Jesus in me, but what about the selfishness, the hurt, the pain, and all the rest of my character defects that I had installed over the past 30 and a half years? These would become my obstacles to overcome over the next 6 years. I would finally get to see my son Peyton in the spring of 2017 after over 3 years of being absent in his life. Joel 2:25 says, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. I have never experienced a feeling of wholeness like I did until the day I had my wife and all 5 of my kids together at once, and that happened in this church. Only God has made a habit in my life of not showing up, but showing up and showing out, and I am grateful for it. Jesus had his fingerprints all over my life, but me, being the imperfect man that I am, still chose to learn things the hard way. I allowed my feelings to dictate the outcome of how things. I allowed my feelings to dictate the outcome of things they had no business dictating. I quit my job in January of 2018 simply because I was upset I had not received my raise yet, so I quit. Stephanie would then start working, and I would stay home with the kids, still attending church, but our home life was miserable. We had no communication, no intimacy, no nothing. After 8 months of this, we would separate and then get back together again a week later. We did not acknowledge any of our problems. I always wanted to act as if things were not real, and if I did not acknowledge them, then they would magically disappear. Well, they didn't disappear, and a year later, we would separate again. This time, it was different, though. I thought we were truly done, and a divorce was inevitable. I would spend this time separated from church, separated from Celebrate Recovery, separated from friends, but most importantly, separated from Jesus. I would end up in a sexual relationship knowing fully that it was sin, but I was so lost I allowed this to go on for 3 months. On a Sunday night, I would finally go to a revival service here at our church, and the preacher called me up in front and prophesied over me and my marriage and my kids. I would call Stephanie that night. She would come home, and 2 weeks later, she would leave again because we still viewed one another as the enemy. One night in prayer, my life and perspective would be forever changed when God told me it is time to stop fighting against her and fight for her. This moment changed my life forever because I have never viewed her as my enemy since. We would again get back together, but the difference this time was we laid out all the garbage completely so we could identify our problems and have a true clean slate and allow healing to happen. Romans 12:2 says, and do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. I had to allow God to completely transform my way of thinking, since my way had gotten me into my messes my whole life. Me and Stephanie would begin to communicate and make decisions together. We began to finally build a solid foundation that is Jesus for our family. God truly began to grow and mature us into who he intended us to be. In May of 2020, I would begin working as a recovery coach at the Damascus House for the 180 Center. On July 31st of 2020, after 15 years, I would get my driver's license back. This may seem like a simple task, but for me it was anything but. I again accepted the lie that I would never get them back due to the money I owed, but God showed up and showed out. That same summer, my pastor's wife would tell Stephanie that Azaria would have the last name Scott one day. We didn't think much about it at the time, but a year later, I would adopt her, and she became Azaria Scott, Daddy's little girl. The past 3 years of my life have been truly amazing. Not easy by no means, but absolutely amazing. I finally know who I am. I am a sinner who has been saved by grace. When I look in the mirror, I know that I am a good husband, I am a good dad, and at the end of the day, that is all that matters to me, because being a good man at home allows me to truly make a difference in the world. I know that I am truly none of these things without my relationship with Jesus. If you're new here tonight, I want to encourage you to keep coming back. It has been through the power of Jesus and Celebrate Recovery literature that I have learned how to identify character defects in my life. I have been through 4-step studies so far. Yes, I'm that messed up. And have been able to find true healing in different areas of my life each time. I have found acceptance in this ministry. I have found friends who have become brothers, and I have found a place to share what Jesus has done for me and my family. I want to close with this. As I look back at my life, I used to always look at the bad. Today, I do my best to choose to look at the good. I have an amazing wife who truly loves me and puts up with me because I'm not always that nice. She has seen me at my worst, and today I do my best that she gets me at my best. I have 5 kids who are healthy and full of life. I have a mom who is always there for me in my trouble no matter what. I had the very best mammal and grandpa I could ever ask for. I'm able to call my dad today, which is a true blessing in itself. They say if you make one true friend in your life that you are lucky. Well, I have been fortunate enough to have 2 that today I call my brothers, because they are 2 relationships that are 20 plus years and today are stronger than ever. I have the most amazing church family and Celebrate Recovery family a man could ask for. I have seen God touch my 4 sisters, especially Raven, who even though I am her big brother, at times she has been my caretaker. We have a song that we sing a lot. It says, "You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good." The enemy meant to kill me with addiction, and today God uses that literally for me to make a living and encourage others with my story. The enemy meant to destroy my marriage, and today God uses it to show his true power of transformation. Mark 10:9 says, "Let no man split what God has joined together." Thanks for letting me share. We're going to open these altars